Bashar al-Assad left Syria after meeting with a Russian official. This was stated by Hafez Assad, the son of former Syrian President Bashar Assad. He noted that if his family had intended to leave Syria, it would have done so in either 2012 or 2013, when Damascus was under siege and regularly bombed. According to Hafez Assad, the presidential family had no plans to leave Syria until the person from Russia arrived, but everything changed on the night of December 7th to 8th. Bashar al-Assad's son defended his dissertation in Moscow, while his mother, Asma, is receiving treatment in Moscow. Hafez Assad said that the shelling near Damascus did not scare them and called it reality. Hafez Assad expressed his views that the army is preparing to defend the Syrian capital. Everything changed after midnight. A Russian official came to our house in Al-Malki and conveyed a request to move to Latakia for a few days to monitor the fighting of the regime forces. At Damascus International Airport, the former president's brother, Maher Assad, joined them. At 3 in the morning, they were taken to the country's Khmeimim military base on a Russian military plane. After the plane landed, they were supposed to go to the president's residence in the Burj Islam district. This residence is located 40 kilometers from the airport. However, subsequent attempts to contact the residence were unsuccessful, and no one answered the calls. At this point, Bashar Assad received information that the military had withdrawn from the battlefield. Hafez Assad emphasized that during the daytime they received information from the Russian command at the Khmeimim base about the seriousness of the situation in the surrounding areas. They told us that it was no longer possible to leave the base, because the terrorists had spread throughout the country. The situation had become chaotic and contact with the country's military leadership was lost. After consultations with Moscow, they told us that a request had been sent to Russia for our evacuation. Some time passed, and we boarded a plane bound for Moscow, and at night we landed at the airport in Moscow. The Kremlin said Wednesday that a Russian citizen was freed in the United States in exchange for Moscow's release of American Mark Fogel, but refused to identify him until he arrives in Russia. According to Associated Press, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the unidentified individual would return to Russia in the coming days, and his name would be revealed when he returns home, unlike during past prisoner exchanges between Moscow and Washington, when Russians and Americans were released simultaneously and their identities were revealed right away. Recently, work has been intensified along the lines of the relevant departments. There have been contacts, Peskov said in a conference call with reporters. And the result of these contacts has been the release of Fogel, as well as one of the citizens of the Russian Federation who is currently being held in places of detention in the United States of America. This citizen of the Russian Federation will also be returned to Russia in the coming days. Asked by reporters if the Russian released as part of the deal could be Alexander Vinnik, Peskov said that the name of the man being freed would be announced upon his return. Vinnik, arrested in 2017 in Greece at the request of the U.S. on cryptocurrency fraud charges, was later extradited to the United States where he pleaded guilty last year to conspiracy to commit money laundering. Fogel, an American history teacher who was deemed wrongfully detained by Russia, has been released and was returned to the U.S. on Tuesday in what the White House described as a diplomatic thaw that could advance negotiations to end the fighting in Ukraine. Fogel was arrested in August 2021 and was serving a 14-year prison sentence. Steve Witkoff, a special envoy for U.S. President Donald Trump, left Russia with Fogel and brought him to the White House, where Trump greeted him. Fogel, who is from Pennsylvania, was expected to be reunited with his family.
Россия освободила Марка Фогеля, бывшего сотрудника американского посольства в Москве. Он был приговорен к длительному сроку заключения за контрабанду наркотиков. В Вашингтоне возвращение Фогеля называют важным этапом в украинском кризисе. Ну а западные СМИ обращают особое внимание на высокопоставленного чиновника из команды Трампа, который подключился к диалогу с Москвой.
В последнее время по линии соответствующих ведомств была интенсифицирована работа, были контакты И результатом этих контактов стало освобождение Фогеля, а также одного из граждан Российской Федерации, который в настоящее время содержится в местах лишения свободы в Соединенных Штатах Америки. Этот гражданин Российской Федерации на днях тоже будет возвращен России. Естественно, таким договоренностям предшествует весьма и весьма скрупулезная работа переговорная. И, конечно, такие договоренности, они вряд ли способны стать переломным моментом, но в то же время по крупице это определенные шаги по наращиванию того самого взаимного доверия, которое сейчас находится на низшей точке.
Были сообщения американских СМИ о том, что спецпосланник Трампа Витков вчера встречался с президентом Путиным, причем более 3 часов. Все-таки была такая встреча?
Мне нечего вам сказать по этой теме. У меня никакой информации по этой теме для вас нет.
Трамп рассказал, что в среду может быть обменен еще один американец. Действительно так или нет?
Мне тоже по этой теме нечего сказать.
А правда, что России передадут Винника, Александра Винника?
Подождите, гражданин, когда будет на территории Российской Федерации, то будет известно его имя.
Участвовали ли третьи страны-посредники в организации обмена Фогеля?
Нет, в данный момент нам не о чем сообщить.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday threatened to withdraw from the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and resume its war against Hamas if the militant group does not go ahead with the next scheduled release of hostages on Saturday. According to Associated Press, Hamas accuses Israel of violating the ceasefire agreement, including by not allowing a surge of tents and shelters into the devastated territory. U.S. President Donald Trump threatened that all hell will break out if the militant group does not release the remaining Israeli hostages held in Gaza by Saturday. At the White House, Trump is hosting Jordan's King Abdullah II as he escalates pressure on the key U.S. ally to take in refugees from Gaza, perhaps permanently, as part of his audacious plan to remake the Middle East. Palestinians and the international community have seethed over Trump's recent comments that any Palestinians potentially expelled from Gaza would not have a right to return. During the first phase of the ceasefire, Hamas has committed to freeing a total of 33 hostages captured in its October 7, 2023, attack, in exchange for Israel releasing nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. The sides have carried out 5 swaps since January 19, freeing 21 hostages and over 730 Palestinian prisoners so far. The war could resume in early March if no agreement is reached on the more complicated second phase of the ceasefire, which calls for the return of all remaining hostages and an indefinite extension of the truce.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is threatening to call off the ceasefire with Hamas. Netanyahu says he will resume the war in the Gaza Strip if Hamas does not follow through on a promised release of hostages this Saturday. His tough words come after Hamas announced it will not free the hostages. It accuses Israel of violating the ceasefire. It says Israel is obligated to allow more badly needed aid into the territory. Netanyahu's tough position comes after President Donald Trump called on Hamas to release all remaining hostages by Saturday. That's over 70 people. Now, this demand goes well beyond the contours of the current phase of the ceasefire, and it's unlikely that Hamas could meet this deadline. But the tough words appear to be emboldening the Israeli leader. Remember, Netanyahu was at the White House last week where he had a warm meeting with President Trump. Now, Saturday's a few days off. That gives time for international mediators to work behind-the-scenes diplomacy in hopes of restoring this ceasefire. But in the meantime, Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli military to beef up troops in and around Gaza. A resumption of the war would be disastrous for the people of Gaza, who are only beginning to recover from 15 months of heavy fighting. It also would spell trouble for the families of remaining Israeli hostages. They are calling on Netanyahu to stick with the ceasefire until all hostages come home. So Netanyahu in the coming days will face heavy pressure from multiple directions and have some very difficult decisions to make.